All right, pulling this GS450 motor apart here. We've pulled all the 10mm bolts around the top there, and next we're gonna pull this top cover here. And these sometimes will stick down just because of the gasket sealing it so well. You don't actually have to remove these caps. Some people think you do, but to remove them you actually have to pull this cover and get to those Phillips. So covers are off. The 10mm here you don't actually have to pull. We just pulled those so you can see what was underneath there. We'll replace that gasket as well, but that's the top cover. Now we have your cam shafts there. Got the cam chain tensioner here. Pulling this, we've loosened up this cam chain, and we're going to go ahead and pull these two 10mm. And now I like to pull that tensioner so that when we pull these top, this is the intake cam here, this is the exhaust cam. Now those cams are ready to come out of there. And pull these. I like to make a mark, or at least I remember where these go. Sometimes I'll try to set them in the exact order that I pulled them off. They've got dowel pins that run in beside them, and sometimes I can kind of hold them up from coming off. All right, now we're able to just take those cam shafts and pull them out like this. Now you can replace the shims here. Again, that's intake. This is the exhaust side, and the shims that sit. I'll pull one of those off for you. Just take a magnet, or you can take a small screwdriver and kind of pry them up, but the shim just sits on top here. Just take a small screwdriver and just kind of pull it off there, but a lot of times they'll just come right off of there. But that is the shim on these, the shim on the valve. So adjust valves, you just replace that shim there. All right, now I'm going to spin this. We're going to pull this cylinder head. I'm just going to drop that cam chain down in there. Doing that, you just want to keep in mind that it's down there so you don't spin that motor over. We have our speedo gear here, our tack gear here. I don't know if I'll try getting that out now, but you just pull it out is all you do. Once you have the holder Phillips screw off, which we took that off when we were pulling the cable off. 14mm, and these might be tight enough to where we need the pneumatic impact. If all we were doing is adjusting those valves, we wouldn't want to drop that tensioner down there, or that cam chain down there like I did. But since we're pulling this whole top end apart, it's fine. All right. Those are off. I'm going to set these back down in here. So we don't lose where these go. I believe all the 14mm are out. I think, if I remember right, yep, we have one 10mm that's going to take a wrench down here. Directly, if you're looking at it, it's directly down in the center here. Just a nut. Kind of hold that on, I don't think. Yeah, intake side doesn't have it, it's just exhaust side. Alright, that one's off there. Now we can pull this cylinder. A lot of times what I'll do is take a crowbar. You be really careful when you do it this way, that you don't get into the fins, but if you can pry in the right spots here, you're able just to, and it doesn't take much a lot of times, but my fingers aren't small enough to get in between the two. If you're having to use a lot of force, you would not want to use a crowbar, as that would definitely damage some fins. The head is off there, and we've got a cam chain guide. That's off as well. That goes down in there. Alright, so this guide will come out now. And now the cylinder is actually ready to come off as well. No extra bolts there. Same thing. Be really careful where you do this at. You don't want to pry in between the crankcase and the cylinder on a gasket area there, or you'll for sure damage stuff. Now, because our cam chain is down in there, if we, that guide here was being pushed up against the side, makes it a little bit of a challenge to get out. Okay, cylinders are off there. Inspect the walls. Make sure there's a little bit of a groove in there. If there is a groove, it either needs bored or honed or replaced. Pull piston pin. Now get in there with a angled pick. I keep my thumb held over it. That way that pin doesn't, or that clip doesn't go flying. And you can just push that pin out. If you're having problems with that pin, just want to be careful you don't damage it. Push it out, it damages that piston. A lot of times if the pin isn't coming out, you probably need to replace the pistons anyways, because that means they've gotten hot, probably more than likely scored up. Now, to put this circlet back in, opposite of how it came out, I'd shove the open end up against the piston into that groove there. Oops, that's the wrong side. Into the groove, and then I just take that same pick, push it down in there. Now the circlip's back on there, so we can keep track of where that is. Now if we're spinning this motor over, take this cam chain out and pull on it, and that'll turn that motor over. Now we're able to get this side out, same thing. Don't stab yourself with the pick, but also don't want that pin, that clip to go flying. Save time, I'll just set these aside here. Alright, to pull this guide, we're going to have to get down into that bottom end, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the starter now. And I've removed those two bolts up top there. And there's your starter. We'll test that and make sure it's good. Now we're going to flip this up, and I will pull the stator. And I'm going to grab a block to set up. Oh, that's going to sit just fine like that. Now this Countershaft sprocket cover here, the chain sprocket cover is here, clutch adjust is here. These bolts are somewhat rounded off, but I'm able to loosen at least that side. I'll show you what that looks like underneath here. You pull this cover, you don't need to take, to pull this larger cover here, you don't need to take this cover off. I just wanted you to see what it looked like underneath of there. There's your clutch adjust. So we've got a 10mm lock nut and a flathead screw to adjust your clutch rod, and I'll show you that when we get deeper into that motor, how that works there. Set this back on there. Here's your shift pattern here. Shifter is there, shift shaft. Now this cover's ready to come off. Now that cover's off. And we got your countershaft sprocket. We've got a nut holding this countershaft sprocket on. We got to flatten the keeper on this. Take a good size socket, 1.25 inches. Just pull that off. We're going to try to do it without spinning that sprocket there. So you can stick something down there. You do not want this to spin if you have something stuck in there. So just be really careful, you got a good hold on it. That nut is off, then you're able just to pull that countershaft sprocket, replace it if need be. Make sure going back together that that nut is in the correct, going in the correct direction. Grooved goes in, kind of holds that sprocket on the splines there. Here is the rod. I showed you how to adjust your clutch there. That's the rod that you'd be pushing against the clutch. We'll go ahead and remove the stator cover now. We got Phillips screws all the way around this. All those bolts are off. Now we can take this cover, pull it out. And this is sealed with a gasket. And not prying in a gasket location, just put a little bit of pressure up in there, in that area that there wasn't a gasket. And this is magnetic actually behind here, so it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes along with that gasket surface sealing up. If you can pull it off evenly, that's the best thing. There we go. Cover's off. There's your stator there with your coils and everything. Then here's your flywheel here. Gasket's off. Obviously we're not reusing a gasket there. Here's your idler gear. So your starter sits here, touches this idler gear, touches that gear, turns that gear, turns this. This is one way. So as soon as you get that motor cranked up and turning, this thing will just sit there and spin until that gear turns out and starts that motor. 17mm bolt here. And again, I'm going to hold it so it doesn't spin because we have that cam chain that could potentially break the case. have to grab a special puller for that one there. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this gear position sensor here. 2 Phillips. There's your gear position sensor. And this is a smaller flywheel threads than I've seen before on a GS in a little bit. That's interesting. We'll have to find the puller for this. The correct one. It takes a smaller one. Generally, Suzuki uses about this size here. This one does not, though. This is a little different style than what I've seen in the past. So go ahead and flip this over now. I think we'll probably have some oil dump out. Be careful not to damage that flywheel when we tip this up. Alright, same thing, a mess of Phillips screws all the way around the outside of this one. And we're going to pull this pulsar cover first, 3 Phillips screws. Sometimes on these smaller ones, if you can't get these screws off, if they feel like they're stripping, if you turn them clockwise, so opposite direction of loosening them, sometimes we'll get them to a spot where you can remove them, if that makes sense. So this cover is now off, and there's your coils there. 2 Phillips screws to remove this plate. We've got a sensor down there we'll have to remove before we can. Let's see, that one doesn't. This one's been rounded off in the past. See if we can get it with this impact driver here. Alright, plate is loose there. Now we've got a sensor here we got to loosen up. There we go. And there's that pulsar there. Sensor there, we've got Phillips all the way around there. We'll see if we can get them pulled off here with this electric impact. 2 in here. Then we have a 10 millimeter to pull this rotor off. Make sure that 10 millimeter comes off. Don't try to spin this. Looks like a 17 or a 19. That won't work like you think that it will. Pull this off, then that'll all come off. So going back together, then these actually slide out and go in between there. And now this cover's ready to come off. There's a couple different spots you can pry on that cover to get it removed there. And there is your clutches. Larger nut there. We'll go ahead and take this clutch pack off. Takes 10 millimeter all the way around there. Loosen all these out. Clutch hub will come off here. You can just pull this up. Once you get that pulled up, you can pull that bolt off. There'll be a nut in behind there. We'll flatten out this keeper. Inch and a 16th. I'm gonna keep that from spinning. Now the entire pack will come off. We're gonna set this back on there.
Okay, got it. See ya.
And the clutch is off there. By putting those bolts back on, you just kind of hold everything together so it doesn't fall apart. Got your shift shaft here. We've got a 10 millimeter we'll pull apart here. Spring loaded, so kind of watch your fingers there. Not extremely tight, but there's a holder that kind of holds that drum into place. That shift shaft now can just slide up out of there. And there's your shift shaft. Alright, we'll pull the oil pump now. We're going to need snap ring pliers for that. snap ring's off, now the gear is off, and then this pan will pull out now because that will just fall out if we don't. Just 3 bolts for that oil pump. And then you kind of got to wiggle it back and forth to remove it. There's a gasket in behind there that seals that up really good. Sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. You don't have a whole lot to grab onto. Take and run that through. Now to get this pan and the circlet back on, you actually have to take your finger, hold behind there. Otherwise that shaft pushes the other way too much and you can't get these parts back together. Now we can put that circlet back on. Shift drum is here, and we'll pull the 17mm bolt up top here. It's a spring-loaded gear that will hold that shaft or that drum from coming out if we don't. Oh, that's a 19mm. And then the ball will just stay down in there, and we'll grab that once we split that case. We've got this larger nut here. To split that case, this won't actually have to come off, but we'll just go ahead and do it now if we can get on there. That should be really using a deep socket, 1.25" deep socket, but I think there'll be enough that we can grab onto there. Cancel that. There's not. Grab a deep socket, then do that one. So that is, well, we'll do the 17mm here. That doesn't hold anything together, but we'll just remove that one. Now to split this case, we're going to have to remove these 3 Phillips. Okay, we got that flywheel. We won't pull that yet. We'll go ahead and leave that actually hooked up because I don't have the right threaded puller for that. But it's just going to be a bolt style puller, and then just run that in. We'll flip that crankcase up and over and pull this bottom oil pan here. Got a lot of 10mm bolts there. Drain bolt is here. Okay, we got the oil pan. get this off of here. Not a real good place to lift up on this. And once we get it loosened up, that gasket just seals it. There we go, got it pulled off there, and you can see that gasket there just seals it up really good. Anything sitting in the bottom there should sit down in this pan. And then we'll go ahead and pull the rest of these bolts off. Oil filter is here, that's a 10mm. And we shouldn't need to pull that cover at this point to split this case. We've got a whole bunch of 12mm bolts and a whole bunch of 10mm bolts that we'll start removing now. I'll try to count these as we go. Let's see, we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So far I have 13 10mm bolts. All right, so I have 9 8mm bolts. That's assuming I haven't missed any. And I could have. There's quite a bit of dirt here, making it a little bit of a challenge. And then over on this side where our countershaft sprocket was, we've got a 2 10mm. It's kind of a brace that goes across the cases. And they have keepers on them as well. That's the brace that I was talking about there. Okay, that might be all of the bolts. We can kind of double check everything, look everything over really good. We'll know it if there's one that's holding us up. All right, kind of a spot here to stick a screwdriver or a crowbar. That gives us a little bit of space. And then there's generally one like the front and the back. On these older motors, they can be a big challenge to